The ideal person to go to is the executive, but then there's a problem. This is something I've looked at, and it's containment. When we talk about middle management,
How worthless they are, you mean?
yeah, pretty much.
Welcome to Unrigged. I'm Kirk Coburn. The corporate game is rigged against experienced professionals. And today we're talking about a version of that rigging most people never see. My guest is Stuart Du Casse. And Stuart has spent 30 years in the trenches of complex enterprise systems, finance, public sector, regulated industries. He's the guy leadership calls when their dashboards say everything's green, but their gut says something different. They know something's about to blow up. Stuart founded AutoSpec QA to do what most organizations can't do internally: cut through the false confidence and show them where real delivery risk actually sits. Before the incident, before the regulator calls, before the customers revolt. Stuart, give people the 30-second version. What do you actually do when you walk into an organization?
Well, the first thing is that a lot of companies think of activity, they mistake activity for confidence. What you tend to find is they have all the easy tests and all the easy processes that they automate. Then all of a sudden something comes along where someone says, what about the bit with a payment or a business critical process? And they're like, and they kind of get stuck. The way that I approach it is to look at the business critical processes first and take it from there. What are your three most critical processes that you cannot afford to fail?
Before we get into the details of what all this means, what's the one thing you're doing right now that has absolutely nothing to do with testing software or enterprise risk?
Cycling on the mountain bike across all the forests around the back here, along the seafront in the winter, and then tennis.
Is there something about cycling or your hobbies that feeds back into what you do?
It helps me reset. Everyone's got a deadline. They need to deliver something. But sometimes the best thing is just to walk away.
Amen. All right, let's get into it. You've been doing this for 30 years. That's a lot of time watching organizations get this wrong. Let's talk about the rigged part. You told me something that I think is going to hit home for a lot of people, that most organizations confuse activity with confidence. Green dashboards, which I love to see, by the way, that quietly hide the riskiest user journeys. Walk me through that. What does that actually look like inside an enterprise?
It's the low-hanging fruit. They just go for the real basic stuff, which is great for a demonstration. The process I look at is have a look on any one of these user journeys and find out what their assumptions are. So you kind of ask the awkward questions: where's this data coming from? Who looks at it? What's this person do with it? Where does it go after that? Who's responsible? And you find that, and they might say stuff along the lines of, we think it happens, or we think it does this, or we think it does that. At the end of that, you give them a report that says, these are your assumptions, this is where your danger area is. I have this first tier, it's just what you assume on this user journey. And then there's a tier 2 that comes after that, where you're actually finding out. So you're doing a gap analysis of what they assume and what's really going on. But those kind of seams and gaps are quite often where their risk is. When you ask them a question, they kind of go, oh God, we haven't thought of that. It starts to flush out all the idiosyncrasies of a system.
Well, Stuart, one of the reasons why I was real keen to interview you is that you're a testing guy, especially in this time and era where experienced professionals are leaving the workforce, they're being laid off. We see Amazon laying off thousands, AI is taking people's jobs, et cetera, et cetera. Testing has always been a critical area. And now you are offering your services directly to people that have problems, Give me a real example where dashboard said green and the reality was red. And why do they go external to hire someone because they're just not getting it done internally?
The problem with all these AI things is they start taking over and they're doing it at such a rate, the human brain can't keep up with it. What's it doing? What does it let out the door? What does it change? And this is the problem. I think it's called Brooks' Law. But just by throwing more people at the problem doesn't actually mean that it's going to solve the problem. Wipe away all the fluff and just start looking and ask the business, what are these three core journeys? What is the highest risk business process that you cannot afford to fail?
Who do you first contact when you're talking about how you can basically de-risk their company for them through better testing protocols, better risk management?
The ideal person to go to is the executive, but then there's a problem. This is something I've looked at, and it's containment. When we talk about middle management.
How worthless they are, you mean?
Yeah, pretty much. Easily, that's it. And they don't want stuff to get to the top tier. Yeah, it's a thing called containment. Yeah. And then the executives want a peaceful life. Like, as everybody does. Everybody wants a peaceful life. However, like with anything, there's a way you can present it to people.
Tell us about the 3x3.
The 3x3, it's time boxed. It's also just 3 journeys. We stick to 3 journeys. And for each user journey, we've got 3 tiers. So we make a note of the assumptions. Against that, we then have a look at what's actually happening, the actual. So you've got assumptions, actual. Once we've got a steady base, we can then start to look at how to automate. So whether that's API testing or the GUI testing. But having said that, there's also the sponsorship for the 3x3 comes from the C-suite.
So this is your unique process that you developed for how you run engagements with clients.
Yeah. It's exactly.
And you're one of the things that we all have to do as solopreneurs is we're always perfecting our process, but it's also our unique processes is what sets us apart from other people. Yeah. What sets 3x3 apart from your competitors or doing it in-house, what others are doing today?
Why I wrote the ramp bit is because an executive can look at it and say, oh, crikey, this could be me. If this all goes wrong and this finds out, I think it's going to find out, I'm on the hook. So I had to write the ramp thing. There's risk in your system. There's always going to be risk in your system. So wouldn't you rather know where the risk is?
There's no incentive in many ways for middle management to alert executives of big risk unless something goes wrong. Their incentives are, unfortunately, to protect themselves. That's a problem. At what point in your career did you realize this wasn't fixable from the inside? And how did that lead you to where you are today?
I'll be honest with you, there's a lot with the world of testing and QA. I did the manual stuff for 18 years. Then we've moved to Agile and automation. I think Katie Sharman, she wrote the article on once upon a time there was this cute little hierarchy and the manager sat at the top and he did this and he bossed everybody else around. And Agile, I'm pretty sure Agile was written by the developers.
Of course it is.
You know what I mean? It's like, we don't want any shithead middle manager in here. We work in our own little teams. We know what we do, and we don't need somebody, an intermediary. And the intermediary eventually blocks it. And I'm pretty sure that the sponsorship has come from the top. A lot of it is covering their asses. Manual testers, there used to be a lot of stuff like, oh, automation isn't testing, it's checking. And it pissed me off, but there's a guy called Michael Bolton, not the singer, but this guy is just really irritating. I mean, if you had to listen to him, you'd never get anything out the door. And sometimes I could never figure out why an executive, look, man, I'm telling you, this is what's happening in your company. Do you know what I mean? And I never got any response back from them. However, I've since learned that there is a way in which to, as it were, I think they call it patterns. We're seeing a pattern here because the last thing someone wants to know is it's wrong and, oh shit, what does this mean for me?
So this is a great piece of advice. What advice do you give to other people going out on their own? This is client management 101, but what did you learn? I've learned this the hard way. You can't just tell the CEO or a management team that their business, that the baby is ugly. You have to do it in a different way. What's the piece of advice? What's the nugget here?
It's when you're speaking to an exec.
Mm-hmm. You can't be blunt. Is it being diplomatic, or is there something more here that you would pass on as wisdom?
I've seen it's patterns, whereas they know they need to deal with it. They know it's there. It's try and mitigate their risk before it hits them in the face. Like Mike Tyson said, isn't it? Everyone's got a plan until they get smack in the face.
Bite your ear off, you know.
Yeah.
Or that might be Evander Holyfield's.
Learning how to not point the finger.
In sales, when I am talking to clients about this, it is when they're talking to management teams or potential people to hire them, they say, hey, I work with clients that have robust testing protocols and dashboards, but something blows up and they're caught off guard. Everything looks great, but then something goes wrong. I don't know if that applies to you, Mr. Potential Client. And that's when you get them talking and they're like, we do have great dashboarding. And you're like, tell me more about that. And you back into whether they're a risk or not. And that's using almost judo. They come to their own conclusion that there is a big challenge here without you telling them, hey, you're about to run into a brick wall, because no one wants to be told that.
No, that's right. I mean, the thing is, like I said, this is stuff, it seems to be patterns. You already carry the risk, but the problem is not whether your teams are working hard, it's whether the confidence you're relying on is real. The 3x3 is a short, focused diagnostic that tells you three things. It's like, A, what do you genuinely understand? B, what actually works? And C, what would fail without you noticing? And it says the outcome is simple. It's fewer surprises, fewer uncomfortable conversations, and safe decisions without slowing delivery or embarrassing anyone. And the 3x3 explained in plain English is software doesn't fail because teams don't care. It fails because decisions get made on trust instead of evidence. It said most programmers don't stop when they should because stopping feels harder than continuing. Over time, activity replaces certainty and confidence quietly becomes assumed. The 3x3 exists to surface those assumptions early before customers, regulators, or incidents do it for you. The 3x3 used. The 3x3 is designed for situations where delivery is already in motion and leadership still has to make decisions. It's used when work is progressing but confidence feels thin. So the stuff like we're talking about just now. Releases are technically green but still uncomfortable. Stopping or changing direction would be awkward, expensive, or political. In those moments, reassurance is not neutral, it's dangerous.
Sounds great. So you use a phrase that I love. It's called automation theater.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between automation that looks impressive and automation that actually reduces business risk?
The one, it's not so much how it looks, It's the actual underlying journey that's been automated.
Let's get tactical, Stuart. How much money have you seen organizations waste on testing tools that made the PowerPoint look good but didn't actually reduce risk?
It runs into hundreds of thousands of dollars, pounds. It's £500,000. When I was working at the MOD 10 years ago, it was costing them £17,000 a day, a team of about 30 odd manual testers. And the same thing happens now. People automatically make the assumption that because you've got a browser, you can automate it. I see on LinkedIn where they talk about AI being able to fix dodgy or flaky tests. And my answer to that is, don't get AI to fix the test, get AI to fix the underlying app.
My AI sent out 2,500 emails without me wanting them to. So I've been there before. So who's selling the theater? Is it the vendors or the internal teams trying to justify headcount, or both?
I think it's both. You look at every other post on LinkedIn, it's about AI. And some are saying AI is going to take your job, AI is going to do this, AI is going to be that. But then I hear the latest thing is that where a lot of the big people like Google, Facebook, and they had all these predictions that they made back in 2022 that by 2025 we will have this. I think they laid off, didn't they, 150,000
Right.
across America. And they're suddenly realizing that, oh shit, we've kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater. That AI is doing its thing, it's going ahead, but no one can keep tabs on it. This is the thing. And the problem being is that on the one hand, you've got AI, then you've got another bit of AI that's doing the automation testing, and all these bots and Christ knows what else are all going off in different directions. Meanwhile, the CTO is stuck there saying, hold on a minute, what's going on here? And I've actually got a call. I was bowled over. I got a message on Friday afternoon with a CTO who is in that position.
If I'm a CTO or CEO listening to this, how do I know if I'm watching theater or the real thing? This is your sales pitch, Stuart. Give it to us.
One rule governs everything. Don't try to prove something works until you're sure you understand it. And the sales pitch is how the 3x3 works. And the 3x3 isn't a framework, it's not a maturity model, it's a process. And a process that forces things to happen in the right order.
If I'm talking to you as a CTO of a software company, how do I know that I need you? And this is not the sales pitch. I just want to know how, in your words, how can you help me determine if I have good systems in place or I'm about to blow up?
What happens is the system builds up over time and there's a lot of theatre. And one of them, the companies that I was working for last year, they have 1,500 tests that they would ideally like to do automatically, but they don't have the manpower or the knowledge for the automation to cover them automatically, write the code. So what they do, they sample and say, we're just going to pick these 300 tests and the other 1,200, they literally, a lot of the time, they hope for the best. The driver of a lot of it is, come on, we've got to get this done, we've got to get this done. And the driver as well behind that is with automation, it's, oh, okay, like it takes one guy 40 hours that we can do this, overnight. You can. This is what the 3x3 address. I sent out a message saying I'm currently speaking with engineering and product leaders to understand delivery and release obstacles that they are running into. So this is not a sales call, it's a genuine market research to make sure my work stays focused on real problems. If you are open to a short conversation, I would really value your perspective. 5 to 10 minutes is enough. I got a message back on Friday, would be happy to have a chat sometime about a potentially short discovery type engagement. Goal being accelerating coverage by using agentic AI across the pyramid and how best to achieve that with combo of existing team and some outsource. So I responded to it and said, when teams say agentic AI, I'm seeing it used to mean quite different things, from assisted test authoring through to more autonomous coverage, discovery and execution. I'd be happy to understand what outcome you're actually optimizing for and where confidence or coverage currently feels weakest across the stack. He came back this morning. Essentially, I'm optimizing for a big jump in coverage as the current default isn't as good as it should be. And that's effectively what the 3x3 is looking at. It's like, let's start looking at the nitty gritty here. Forget all the theatre and all your charts. We're looking at you as a business proposition, and that business proposition is, what are your most highest risk journeys? We need to be able to move faster, but with the appropriate guardrails. So I think the guardrails and what I bring to the situation is say, okay, what are those guardrails? And the guardrails would be, and how you say, how do we find those guardrails? And it's to have a look from a business perspective. This doesn't involve anything to do with test tools or methodologies or agile or anything like that. What is the most riskiest thing that could go wrong with your business today that could spell big trouble?
Stuart, this is interesting. A light went off. I built a CRM for experienced professionals. Unlike most CRMs that are generic and they're made for teams, this is made for individuals and small teams that are selling themselves. And it also has a pipeline for selling and a portfolio for actually managing clients once you have them. I also have a platform for managing my clients because they go through my methodology. The test I realize that matter is revenue. Before I do anything, do they have access to the platform? Are all systems go? The other test is making sure that all the other people that are on the CRM, does it work? And it took me a while to understand what tests mattered, because if a customer is complaining because they can't get on or can't use it, that's a big problem. I had to back in the hard way. It took me a long time to figure out what really mattered. And what really matters is, if I'm going to lose revenue, that's what matters. It seems like people just keep adding tests without really thinking about the business objective.
That's it. It's like, we got a system, right? Okay, and it does lots of things. Great. Okay, how do we test it? And you have to start somewhere, and that's what I mean. Is what is the highest risk?
All right, so Stuart, let's change gears for a moment. You saw that the game was rigged. Let's talk about what you did about it. You built AutoSpec QA. That's the bypass. So walk me through the decision to go out on your own after 30 years of enterprise experience. What made you say, I'm going to build this myself?
I'd seen the same pattern. I mean, I was saying earlier about patterns, but the pattern is containment. And to be honest with you, there was a lot of it. I just want to go and do my job, get paid as a contractor, not a bad sum of money. But invariably, and then as you get older, you suddenly find, especially if you're doing test automation, you're competing with people in their 20s or fresh grads. Is it leak coders? Is it what they call it? That was the one hand. But then I kept running into the same problems for 20 odd years.
What did people say when you told them, I'm quitting and going out on my own?
I've been a contractor forever. I mean, since 2000. I'm 59. The thing is, I've seen so many projects fail. I've asked myself, is how hard can it be?
So Stuart, you've been doing this for a long time. My audience wants to hear the mechanics of, how do you land clients? How do you compete against 20-year-olds? What is it you're doing? Other people are listening that are on this. They haven't landed a client yet, and they're trying to figure out, like, are they going to survive? You've been doing this. You're competing. You're in the market on your own. Tell us about that. Let's give us details. Are you cold outreaching to people? What are you doing? You hitting your network?
The thing is using LinkedIn. I'm currently working with at the minute a guy called Dan Walter with a fractional formula, and he talks about how people feast and famine. If you're self-employed, you have feast and famine, and that there has to be a pipeline. And your pipeline, just because you're busy and you're working, you might neglect your pipeline. So your pipeline is stuff like you post on LinkedIn. And what Dan says is that LinkedIn isn't a sales tool. LinkedIn is where you build trust. And in order for you to build trust, you need to a degree, you need to be on people's radar. You don't suddenly pop up on their radar, and then the next thing, they get connection request, I accept it, and the next thing someone's trying to sell me something. And
All the time.
That's not how it works. And the thing is, you're building credibility. I mean, the thing that as you get older and the more you've worked through the job that you do, it's your judgment. The sort of thing your dad would say to you when you're 19, that you can't put a young head on old shoulders. You have this is the vehicle when you're getting started, you have to grease the wheels of this vehicle. And it's putting stuff out there enough for people to think to themselves. First off, by the regular posting, you become visible, or people become more aware of you in their orbit. The second thing is then, so once you're a bit more visible, is what's this guy saying? Oh, it's not a question of he keeps droning on about the same thing. It's more a case of, this is the sort of stuff I experience. Oh, okay. I mean, there's one this morning that I put out, and a guy said, love this. This is just exactly where I'm coming from. And that effectively is what you're doing. The thing is, and I'm guilty of this myself, is something comes to an end, an engagement, contract, or whatever comes to an end, and you think, oh, crikey, I better find my next role. Whereas what Dan's turning around and saying, you have this thing going in the background that you need to service every day, every week.
Yeah, my version is the 80-20 rule. 20% of your time should always be prospecting.
Yeah.
So what's your client mix look like today? Or do you just do one engagement at a time, or do you run multiple engagements?
The whole point is, when you're fractional and everything else, is you're charging effectively for outcomes. You're not charging by the hour. A bum on the seat sort of thing is going to cost you. You're charging for the outcomes. So if you can have more than the one client, last year I had the 2 clients. However, a lot of that was, I'm suddenly thinking to myself, how can I divvy up my day? I mean, one kind of paid me on an agreed deliverable, and the other one was kind of paying me on a daily rate. You need to become aware on people's radar, and you also need to have a modicum of what you're talking about. Having got their trust and you know what you're talking about, is for them to engage you.
You said something else that's really important. At least as a founder of multiple companies, I am a big believer in incentives, and I want people working for me, or when I work for someone, I want us to have alignment of incentives. And what you just talked about is, you don't price them by the hour, because you can gouge clients that way. You do it based on deliverables. And I tell my clients and others the same thing. One way to give you a competitive advantage is have an incentive that's aligned with the CEO. And I love that. So when you price things, you're really looking at success. If the client's successful, you're successful. So the advice you're giving is, number one is, you have to be an expert in something, but everyone listening to this, they're an expert. They've spent 30 years in their career. So we got that. Second is you said LinkedIn is a credibility tool, and you need to be present on LinkedIn so people know who you are and what you're about. And you're identifying with people, you're talking about problems you solve and things that people identify with. At the same time, we also talked about that when you do talk to a potential client, you're creating an incentive where you're aligned on the risk and the deliverable, which I think is brilliant. Any other advice you would give to people that are thinking about going out on their own?
Well, there's the old saying that if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old within reason, you don't know what you're talking about. So it's quite easy to use big words and big phrases and stuff like that. But invariably, I like to speak, and it's not dumbing down, but I like to speak at a level what I can only describe as layman terms. It's like, we use APIs and we use APIs here and APIs there. And someone says, what's an API? I always say, easiest description of an API is you think of the waiter in a restaurant. All one system at the table with a menu, and you've got the guy in the kitchen cooking the dinner. And the API is the waiter. So you read your menu and say, yes, okay, we'll have this and this. He writes down on a pad. He takes it over to another system in the kitchen. It comes back.
I love that analogy.
People don't feel offended by that.
Let's go a layer deeper. The stuff that doesn't make it in your LinkedIn post. It's harder about running your own practice than you expected.
I think is the initial, most people would like to think if I could get my customers off my own without an agency, I'd do it. But there lies the rub. It's a slow business. It takes time. And you cannot force or rush. That's what I'm finding. Some people that I might have messaged 3 months ago, 4 months ago, and I think, I've blown it. And then all of a sudden, it pops up.
That is so true. So you have to have head down and you have to be consistent because it does come back.
And the thing is, keep the faith. You've got to keep the faith, but you've got to keep going, I think. And that's not to be deluded. It's, I think, the easiest way for somebody to know that they're up to the task, or what an executive would call signal, so that you know what you're doing is right, is if you've been doing a job and you've got contracts and you've got extensions and you can still keep picking up the work, no matter how sporadic or how sparse that work is, unless you get booted out. But then I've been booted out a couple of times myself. But the bottom line is that if you've been doing the work for a few years and you keep picking up jobs of the same nature, you're doing something right. You're definitely doing something.
Fantastic. I've got a few more questions for you, Stuart. You've been doing this for 30 plus years. What do most people, including experienced people, get fundamentally wrong about software delivery and testing?
I think the biggest thing was it was almost like a production line. And I know there's stuff like TDD, so when you're actually writing the code, the developer and the tester sit there, they kind of have this pairwise programming. But a lot of the stuff, that is almost textbook. Agile, again, is textbook. But the majority of companies have got systems, albeit they might now be browser-based or microservices, but the basic system might be 30, 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it's testing has moved from being something that was just on the end. Right now, I think it's core. IT in itself. At one time, all IT did was they'd have these things that looked like a load of chest freezers in some air-conditioned room around the back, and that would produce these big kind of reports. Someone would look, file it, stick it in a drawer, and never look at it again. It's not an add-on. It's not a bolt-on. And a lot of testing goes on about we've got to break the system, we've got to find bugs, but then it's a bit more holistic than that. It's about how easy is it to use. Not onto your system, navigation, rules, just usability. I mean, like you say, when you were saying earlier with somebody with a CRM system, if someone can't log on or can't find it and start shouting and swearing at the screen, your CRM is
Trouble.
not going
It's
to last.
worthless. Stuart, if you could go back to your first month running AutoSpec QA, or even further, your first month going independent, what would you tell yourself?
I think it's slightly changed, but is the thing with the visibility, and that's not been. You must see it yourself on LinkedIn. You just think, oh, this person's posting a load of crap again. You know that LinkedIn isn't kind of Facebook. That doesn't mean to say we've got to be very serious, but I think the key thing is your pipeline, and the thing what Dan talks about, and Rob and yourself, and also Jag as well. It's you need to have this pipeline, and it's a bit like where you get the rock that you have to push it to get that rock from stationary position where you have to put your shoulder into it and push and
Momentum.
and that's it. I think, yeah, I mean, that's the biggest takeaway is the momentum.
So someone's listening on their commute right now. They're an experienced professional, maybe in QA, maybe in delivery, maybe in a completely different function. And they're thinking, I know the game is rigged, but I don't know how to get out. What do you want them to hear?
I think it's visibility, isn't it? I mean, that's the whole thing. If somebody was the greatest, what's it, they call it a GOAT, greatest of all time, and they suddenly came to you, but you had no context for them or what they did or how good they were, or it's a bit of a jolt to the system. And the natural tendency is, I've got something, I want to buy it. You know, if I put this out there, everyone's going to buy it. It doesn't work like that. The biggest thing is time.
Great advice.
That's your kind of your ramp, and you have to start somewhere. So you need to be on people's radar. I think as well, and from a lot of workshops and bits and pieces I've been on over the last 3, is your ideal client profile, the ICP. Because if you're very good at what you do and you can articulate it very well and you're absolutely amazing, if you're talking to the wrong audience, do you know what I mean? It's neither here nor there.
Great close on that. Your ideal customer profile. That's a great point, Stuart.
Yeah.
Where should people find you?
On LinkedIn, AutoSpec QA, on my website.
Stuart Du Casse, which your name is below, and I'll put it in the notes below.
Yeah.
And your website, AutoSpecQA.com.
That's it.
Stuart, thank you so much this has been lovely. I really appreciate your time. That's Stuart Du Casse, founder of AutoSpec QA. 30 years of watching organizations lie to themselves about delivery risk, and now helping leadership teams see the truth before it costs them. Thank you very much, Stuart.
You're welcome.
If you're listening to this and you're thinking, that's me, I've got decades of expertise and the corporate system doesn't know what to do with me, that's what Unrigged is about. HR filters you out, founders don't. That's the whole game. Join the crew at thereturn.com. That's where experienced professionals are building independent practices together, not motivation, system. Corporate broke the promise, build your own. I'm Kirk Coburn. This has been Unrigged.